comunicar la misma información en los 3 idiomas el día de hoy.
Language justice is also a collective responsibility, and for that we ask that you please speak at a moderate pace, and please one person only at a time so that we don't have to give priority to any information or privilege any information, and so that all of the information can be best communicated in the 3 languages that we have today.
Otra cosa es que la capacidad que tenemos el día de hoy es inglés, español y el lenguaje de señas, pero también queremos honrar a todos los idiomas que están presentes en el espacio, algunos que han sido invisibilizados por la colonización y los procesos de desplazamiento y otros que siguen en resistencia porque estamos en tierra indígena.
Another thing is that today we have capacity for doing the meeting in English, Spanish, and sign language. We would also like to honor all of the languages that are present, some of which have been invisibilized or repressed because of colonization, and some of which continue in resistance today.
Okay, y finalmente vamos a estar usando la herramienta de interpretación de Zoom. Ahorita después de esta oración nos van a mandar para allá y lo pueden accesar en el icono del globito que está en la parte de abajo de su pantalla y ahí pueden escoger ya sea el canal en inglés, en español, y si desean escuchar también el audio o no, pueden silenciar el audio original para solamente escuchar la voz de la intérprete.
Finally, today we will be using the interpretation feature of Zoom. So after this sentence, we will be headed off to our interpreting, and you can access the interpreting. There will be a globe at the bottom of the screen which will appear. You can choose the language you'd like to hear, which channel you'd like to, it will appear as a channel that you can choose. And also in that same place, you can choose to silence the original audio and only hear the voice of the interpreter, or keep the original audio.
Y eso es todo por nuestra parte. Entonces ahora sí, por favor, nos pueden activar como intérpretes. Si tienen alguna pregunta o algún problema técnico, por favor, háganos saber en la cajita del chat. Muchas gracias.
So that'll be it from us. Please activate us as interpreters. If you have any technological problem or question, please let us know in the chat.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Wherever you find yourself this morning, afternoon, or evening, I greet you. Bienvenidos. Welcome to the Building Justice from the Source National Forum. Traditional artists responding to this singular moment in history. My name is Maribel Alvarez. I'm a folklorist, anthropologist, and currently serve as Associate Dean for Community Engagement at the University of Arizona College of Social and Behavioral Sciences. I will function today as moderator for this wonderful program we have prepared. Before I proceed, let me say something about the music you were listening to as we populated the online space. The song is called High Up on a Mountaintop, and it is an original composition by Brett Ratliff, one of our featured artists today, joining us from the heartland of Kentucky. Thank you, Brett. And let me shout a word of gratitude right up front for the tech support team behind the scenes, from all 3 host organizations, but most especially from our California friends, the staff at the Alliance for California Traditional Arts, Julian, Betty, and Jennifer. Abiding by best practices for remote gatherings, I will ask that you please mute your microphones now, as well as turn your video option off. This way, the virtual stage on your computer will shine the spotlight on the artist. I encourage you, starting now and throughout the conversation, to post your questions, comments, lamentations, and exhortations in the chat box. Staff will keep track of the questions and will cluster them and organize them for the open Q&A period a little bit later in the program. We know you are joining us from all across the nation. At this time, we wish to acknowledge the long-standing history that has brought each one of us to reside in the lands of native people of this continent, recognizing both the pain and displacement of colonialism, as well as the thriving, life-giving force of contemporary Native communities in all their beauty and strength. I invite all of you to post in the chat right now the specific tribal community that has stewarded the land in your region or city. Please do so now. I'm coming to you today from the University of Arizona campus in Tucson, Arizona. I acknowledge that this educational institution sits on the ancestral land of the Tohono O'odham people and carries out its work among dozens of sovereign nations, including the Pasquayaqui tribe. This project was conceived and planned by 3 sister organizations, which share in common strong commitments to honoring and supporting the work of community building that is realized through the traditional arts. The Alliance for California Traditional Arts, the National Council for the Traditional Arts, and the Southwest Folklife Alliance. All 3 organizations work under the shared big tent of a field that we call sometimes folklore, folk arts, folk and traditional arts, or folk life. Each organization operates from the premise that the traditional artist is the center of gravity for the kind of work that repairs the root of community. These artists sustain hope and a sense of belonging for so many of us who make up, in the aggregate, this nation of ours. Each one of these organizations works in close partnership with the National Endowment for the Arts to help build the infrastructure of support and caring for folk and traditional arts across the nation. We are grateful for the folk arts to have a seat at the table in our nation's premier arts and culture federal agency. Speaking of art, we are encouraged to see so many voices around the country speaking up for the value of the arts and the culture sector to our economy, the potential of artists to shine the light on systemic inequalities that hurt our communities, and for the absolute necessity to reimagine the present circumstances. Well, friends, in planning this forum, the organizers wish to affirm that the voices of traditional artists are key to deepen these national conversations. During these convulsive times, traditional artists speak with clarity and purpose. They are busy at work facilitating justice, problem solving, and creating wellness. They are innovators. They are resilient. They are bridges for millions who yearn for freedom of expression and human dignity. This crucial work must be made visible in the arts sector, in the national policy making, in philanthropy, education, and in the marketplace. In fact, my hope is that by the end of today's forum, you will agree with me that our master traditional artists possess the wisdom and savviness to lead us all to meaningful change in this historic moment. We are fortunate today to have assembled a panel of 5 extraordinary teachers, artists, community builders, and healers. They will introduce themselves in a moment. Each artist will have 5 minutes for their introduction. Please forgive me, but in my role as timekeeper, I will raise a warning at the 1-minute mark. Artist, when you see this sign, start to conclude your statement. After introductions, I will pose a few questions to the group. The artists will respond and engage in dialogue with one another for about 25 minutes. After that, we will start to take your questions from the chat room for another 25 minutes, give or take. And then we'll have some closing remarks to conclude the panel. Quiero recordarles que este es un evento multilingüe. Si no eres bilingüe en español o inglés, por favor, haz clic en el globo en la parte de abajo de tu pantalla y selecciona español. Para la opción en tu teléfono, selecciona más o more y allí podrás ver la opción de interpretación. For ASL users, you should see the ASL interpreter on the screen, and you can choose to pin their video if you prefer by clicking on the 3 dots. If you prefer to read the captions of the live audio, choose captions at the bottom of your screen. I'm going to invite the first artist, Viki Ho Takamini, Uniki, Kumuhula Extraordinaire, hailing from the land of Pele, that state of the union we call Hawaii, to get us started. Viki.
Ona ona ita hala metale hua, e halele hua noia nakanoe. O ta uno ia e ano ine ali ane ho io ta hiti mai. Ah hiti mai no o ko, a hiti puno me ke aloha. Aloha e, aloha.
Thank you, Viki. Next is Caroline Maslumi, influential historian and maker of African American quilts and NEA National Heritage Fellow. Caroline, say hello.
Thank you. I'm here to represent the Women of Color Quilters Network, a group of quilt makers that I founded. It's the largest organization of African American quilters in the United States. The average age of quilter in this group of 1,500 is 74 to 102. And we have many challenges. We're challenged with issues dealing with racism right now, well, always. We have health issues. COVID-19 has killed over 17 of our members. We've been affected by the pandemic in that our exhibits have been postponed. So we're working through a lot because this time in our nation's history is causing us to rethink how we present our work and how we're carrying on the tradition that we engage in. So I'm happy to be here today too, to hear what others in the field of traditional art have to say about how they've been affected as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Carolyn. Viki, I realized that after the chanting and the greeting, we didn't give you an opportunity to say a few words. So please, Viki, if you are ready, we'd like to hear a little bit more from you other than, I think I cut you off after the song.
It's all good. Aloha mai kako. I'm Viki Ho Takamini. I'm a kumuhula master teacher of Hawaiian dance. I teach all ages from keiki to kupuna, to elders. One of my students is my mother, who's 91 years old. And right now she has private lessons from me because she can. But I got started in 1975 when I graduated through the traditional uniki ceremonies of hula. Started my school in 1977 and have been teaching for the last 40 years. I also taught at the University of Hawaii and Leeward Community College. When I was about 40 years old, my kumu, my teacher, called me, how old are you? And I said, well, I'm in my, 40s. She says, well, you're young yet. When you turn 50, you're going to be doing the most important work of your life. I was already a teacher. I've been teaching for 20 years. And in 1997, the state legislature introduced a bill that would restrict the rights of Native Hawaiians. And in 24 hours, I went from being a master teacher of Hawaiian dance to a Hawaiian activist. My father said, that's my daughter, the activist. And I am okay with that. I organized a 24-hour demonstration at the Capitol. And I also organized this march through Waikiki for more than 5,000 people to advocate for the rights of Native Hawaiians, to the protection of our sacred sites, for our natural and cultural resources. We continue that fight today, and that advocacy is being led by the Hula people in the way that we do, using our cultural practices, our principles, our values of aloha, love for one another, respect for one another, love for our land, love for our sacred sites, our natural resources, our aina that feeds us every single day. At this time of Hulihia, this is a time when we call this time period in 2020 right now, as it was in 97, 98, Hulihia means to turn over. Like when the lava comes over and flows and destroys the land, we don't see that as being destroying the land. We see that as being creating new lands for us and germinating new seeds. This is a time when we're gonna lose some things, but also a time for us to rejuvenate and rethink, discover what we can do as a people, embracing each other in the spirit of love, of aloha, in the spirit of humility, in the spirit of lokahi unity, in the spirit of olu olu, compassion for one another. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Viki and Carolyn. Our next panelist is Terrell Dew Johnson, the on-autumn basket weaver, sculptor, and a health advocate, connecting today from Sells, Arizona, the seat of government of the Tohono O'odham Nation. Terrell. See Terrell and hear him.
Sorry, I had it on mute. My name is Terrell Dew Johnson. I'm from the Tohono O'odham Nation. I'm a traditional and contemporary basket weaver. Been weaving since the age of 10. Learning how to weave came really natural and easy for me. I am also a advocate for traditional native foods. I'm the director for the Alex Pancho Memorial Farm, where we concentrate on growing traditional crops using traditional methods like flood-based farming, but also, again, just the advocate for traditional and contemporary arts here in the Tohono O'odham Nation. I've been weaving for well over 40 years and was very blessed to be able to take that and travel around the world and form friendship with other basket weavers from other indigenous tribes and cultures, but also been able to teach here on the reservation and pass on the art of traditional and contemporary basket weaving to the younger generation. And I'm very honored and glad to take part in this panel discussion today.
Thank you so much, Terrell. It's great to see you. We are having rain today here in Arizona.
Yes.
That's a blessing
Yes,
for all
it
of
is.
us. Thank you. Our next panelist is Brett Ratliff. You already heard his music earlier today. Brett is a multi-instrumentalist, cultural organizer, an apprentice of and teacher of all things Appalachian, connecting from his home in Kentucky. Hello, Brett.
Hi, Maribel. Thank you for having me. Hello to everybody. It's such an honor to be included. I know that there are so many others that could be asked and probably should be asked, and to be involved in the conversation is quite an honor to be here. I grew up in a historic coal camp called Van Leer, Kentucky. Not an active coal camp, of course, by the time I was growing up there, but came up in a coal mining family, and didn't ever really intend on doing that myself. But at a certain point, when I wanted to stay, decided that I wanted to stay in the area, but didn't want to mine coal, music was the thing that I was doing that seemed like, okay, well, I've got this, I'll just start doing this. And so through music and through studying of old time traditional styles and repertoire, I was able to find my own voice. And eventually got into a lot of work with my mentors, with my friends and colleagues to organize festivals and workshops and places where we can make the links between the older generation that was playing and the younger generation coming up. This led me to be involved with organizations like Heinemann Settlement School, where we took a little more holistic approach to cultural organizing and started including a lot more foodways into our organizing, as well as music and dance and storytelling and other community folkways. And I now work for Apple Shop, a multimedia arts and education center in Southeast Kentucky, where we're doing a lot of very similar work centered around the media arts.
Thank you so much, Fred. Last but not least, we welcome to this panel Quetzal Flores. Quetzal is a cultural worker, musical director of the Grammy Award-winning rock group Quetzal, and he's joining us today from East Los Angeles. Bienvenido, Quetzal.
Gracias, saludos, Maribel. Hello, everybody. I'm honored to be here. So fascinated to hear all your stories and to see your work. And as Brett said, there are many other artists that we know that could be here and that could be contributing to this conversation in very powerful ways. And I'd like to say that I come to you standing on a tremendous foundation of Chicano musicians and artists from East LA that have committed their entire lives and generations of this, of really fluidly being active socially and building power in community and not relinquishing this idea of tradition and culture and building with that. In my work with the Alliance for California Traditional Arts as a program manager, I've often worked very hard to bring my whole person to the organization and not put aside the fact that I'm a musician, I'm an artist, I'm a songwriter, and to bring that to my work and also to build connections with other artists through the fact that I understand and that I am a practicing artist as well. And so I'm honored to be here, like I said, and I'm looking forward to listening.
Thank you, everyone. Before I pose the first question and we get going in our conversation, let me make the announcement for interpretation again. Quiero recordarles que este es un evento multilingüe. Si no eres bilingüe en español e inglés, por favor, haz clic en el globo en la parte de abajo de tu pantalla y selecciona español. Para la opción en tu teléfono, selecciona más o la palabra more y allí podrás ver la opción de interpretación. For ASL users, you should see the ASL interpreter on the screen and you can choose to pin their video if you prefer by clicking on the 3 dots. If you prefer to read captions on the live audio, choose captions at the bottom of your screen. Well, thank you everyone for those wonderful introductions. I'm going to start with a question that I will pose to the entire panel, and whoever can answer it is welcome to chime in. We know that as traditional artists, you are driven, like any other artist, by an aesthetic vision, dismantling the world and putting it back together through beauty. But it is also your badge of honor as a traditional artist that your art is an art that serves a greater good, a communal sense of wellness. Can you tell us what forms and methods of participation are you using in your work currently to pass on traditional knowledge and make room for others to feel the power of music, dance, food, activism? Who wants to go first? Quetzal, would you like to get started?
Sure. So this idea of aesthetic vision is very important because oftentimes we get fixed or sucked into this idea that there are these geniuses that emerge from communities that then become famous and rich, and somehow they emerged from the nothing, and oftentimes the collective or communal aesthetic vision gets left behind, and the individual aesthetic vision is the one that is proliferated, right? And this is a problem because the collective intelligence of community has no equal. And with that said, the collective practice of culture has no equal. And so myself, I was lucky enough to have incredible mentors, including Lorenzo Lencho Martinez, Russell Rodriguez, and Ramon Gutierrez Hernandez from Veracruz. And an additional person who I want to name is Rosa Marta Zarate. Now, Rosa Marta taught me the idea of collective songwriting, of how to land in community with my skill set and to really build the idea of composition collectively through a conversation, through a very direct conversation around whatever people wanted to talk about. And to be able to do this has been a tremendous resource in our community. And I'm not the only one doing it. There's tons of people doing it now. And so I guess I want to share a moment where I was able to, with my partner and my son during this time of COVID, because of these relationships that I'm able to build via my work, where we were able to do a collective songwriting workshop with street vendors. And I don't know if you've all been seeing what's been happening with street vendors lately, but people are getting attacked by people on the streets. They're under attack by the violent system, and they've been under attack by a violent system, and they've fought for over 10 years to legalize, to have a legal right to vend in the city of Los Angeles. And so this is a very hard time for them because they've been out of work now for several months. And so we were able to sit with them and to build a song together. And this is a group of leaders, of vendor leaders. They call themselves Vendedores en Acción. And so I'm going to share this with you. And so this was a national vendor summit. There's no volume. We can't hear it. Okay, since you can't hear it, I'm going to tell you it's really exciting and lively. And the lyrics say, we are...
Las frases mandas son
can pause it there. So, you know, the beautiful thing about this is that we were able to have a 2-hour conversation. Oh, you can leave the lyrics up, Betty, please. Sorry. So we were able to have this 2-hour conversation, and the course of this 2-hour conversation to build an actual song, and for them to really guide the process and to have agency and to understand that music, and Brett, you'll understand this. Well, everybody on this will understand this, but music has been co-opted by capitalism. We've been reduced in many instances to understand music as something you buy or something you sell as an artist, right? But there's actually things beyond this binary, and that is the communal practice of music. And this is part of that idea of practicing music in community and being able to compose things together, and for it not to have an owner, and for it to live in community because community wills it so, and because it's important to them. And so now the vendors have taken this as their rally cry, as their identity, because it's filled with their words and their ideas and their tradition, and it speaks to them in a way that builds power. And so I'll stop right there. Thank you.
Thank you, Quetzal. Wow, I hope that everyone answers a question as perfectly as this one when I pose it. So thank you for that example of collective creation. Who else wants to chime in here? What are some of the things you're doing in your communities to keep folks together?
We're involved in a project, the Women of Color Quilters Network in Minnesota. And when I saw the video of George Floyd getting murdered, as a mother, it shook me to the core. When he called for his mother, I think for me that was a guttural cry to do something. So I decided that the network and I would ask museums and galleries in Minneapolis if they would give us space for quilt shows. And we planned starting September 1st through the end of February to blanket the city with quilt shows that deal with racism and police brutality. Under this umbrella, this story, we are the story is the project, and there are several exhibitions under that umbrella of We Are the Story. Among those exhibitions is one called Gone But Not Forgotten. Those members, those people that have been killed by the police throughout this nation, we want to call their names. We want to call attention to those people. We as quilt makers and as traditional artists have always been at the forefront of every political and social movement in this country. And for us as quilt makers, our quilt makers give voice to our concerns as African Americans living here in the United States and all the evil, terrible things that happen to us. So not only are we creating new works of traditional art and teaching people our craft, but also I'm hoping that we inflict a change in people's hearts and the way they think about how they treat people of color here in this country. And we needed so many quilts, it was beyond our organization's capacity. And I put out a call for quilts, and I was really astounded by the response that I got, not only from traditional artists here in the United States, but around the world, from South Africa, from Brazil, from artists who told me, the story of African Americans' lives here in the United States is their story too. So this has become it's quite a monumental effort, but it's reflective too of the strength and spiritual capacity of the traditional artists, and in our case, quilt makers. We're making these changes slowly through the eye of a needle and cloth.
Oh, thank you so much for that. I want to remind the audience that as our artists share their stories and witness to this moment and these practices, you're welcome to put your questions and comments in the chat. There's quite a bit of activity, but our staff will be looking at those so that you can engage in conversations with them through this sort of medium later on. Someone else wants to come in here. I see Viki coming closer to the screen.
Okay, I'll jump in. I think when we're looking at what's going on with the pandemic, with Black Lives Matter, with our lands being taken, I go back to our ancestral history. Our traditions, we didn't have any written language. The Native Hawaiians, our histories were all oral histories passed down from generations to generation. And we had this huge capacity to memorize thousands of lines of chants and songs of our genealogies, our histories that have been passed down for generations, that have been recorded in different ways, not in the normal writing. So we pass that down through our songs. And during this time, I'm reminding, this is the 100th anniversary of women's vote. Well, you know, when we were colonized under the kingdom system, when the Hawaiian kingdom was here, women always had a right to vote under the kingdom. It's only when the United States took over Hawaii and colonized Hawaii that we lost that right to vote. And so these things, I think about how all of our people of color, have been oppressed. And I think about where we are today and how we can make changes in our lives that will impact the next generation. So our teachings go back to those pasts, bring forth those chants and dances, because it's those names that were, my grandmother was fluent in the language. She had 10 children. Not one of that generation speaks their language. I'm the firstborn of my generation. And I was not allowed to speak language because we were reprimanded in school for speaking Hawaiian. So in one generation, the language was stolen, and I say stolen, from my family. The good thing is that when I graduated as a kumuhula, and my kumu graduated on it was the largest graduation over a period of years of master teachers of Hawaiian dance. They came back to reclaim. We reclaimed the voyaging, the hokulea, sailing around the world using not using instruments. We reclaimed all of our cultural practices that have not been lost, but had been hidden. We also brought back our language and have Hawaiian language schools that are perpetuating. So while I'm not fluent, I have 4 grandchildren that are fluent, 2 sons that are fluent. So we've had to work really hard to reclaim that and helping to strengthen that. I'm fortunate to have been born and raised on my ancestral lands. And I protect that with every bone. I think that that's where we as Native peoples, as people of color, can help the next generation to advocate for the protection of those rights that we are entitled to. And I'm in pain all the time, seeing what's happening. And what helps me is my cultural practice. What helps me is the words of my ancestors, the songs and the chants that we are creating, and we are like Kitzel, communing together and bringing our people together to write new songs, that talk about what's happening in our lifetime so that these songs are perpetuated for the next generation in the way that we understand it, in the way that touches us. So our composers are working together here in my space here. Just yesterday, two of our very famous songwriters and singers were here to work together. We offer our space for other people to use to make sure that they can continue their cultural practice at a time when it's not being allowed.
Thank you, Viki. That is so profound and so moving. And each one of you are touching on practices of organizing, and starts with family, and then the next circle, the next concentric circle, and then larger. How is that manifesting in your world, Terrell?
It's again with like what everybody's talking about, how and what you just touched on, it it starts with family, and then it spreads out to community. And with this pandemic going on, a lot of us are forced to stay home and be with family. And so I'm finding that my nieces and nephews and cousins are wanting to learn how to basket weave. And for a very long time I was always out in other communities teaching other members how to weave, but never really was asked to teach in my own family. And now I'm able to do that now because we are home now. And we're also calling upon other community members to go out and harvest traditional materials and work with that, and really go back to the basics of learning traditional weaving. And I'm really humbled by that. Again, going back to the roots of what I've been doing for the past 30, 40 years. So I'm really excited, and I'm very honored that, the younger generation in my family are looking at me to teach them, which again, it's really, it's simple and easy, but I think for a very long time, not having that and working in other communities, I'm really glad that that's happening now and that this is going on so that we can pass on that knowledge.
I love that, Terrell, because I see that happening in Hawaii as well. Because we have to malama or take care of our children and our grandchildren, we're having to spend more time with their elders and their learning practices to keep them. I remember we would do that every summer. I would go to my Molokai on the island of Molokai with my grandmother, and she had a project for us every summer. One year it was weaving, one year it was quilting, one year it was making, baking. But every aloha shirts, she had us all sewing buttons, one for every size of the family. But it was the greatest time for us to spend our time with our grandparents. So I'm finding that that's one of the upside of being in a pandemic, having to spend more time with family and not being as busy or having to run off somewhere. So I love that, Terrell. I was like, amazing work that you're doing. And Carolyn, it's beautiful. Ministry, it's so rich, and rich, and I think being infused with what's happening today, which is why I love the contemporary artwork.
Yeah, and then the thing also too is that what you touched on with your grandmother having a project done every summer. It's not that we're just only basket weavers. We're very all knowledgeable in our traditional foods, our language, many other things that we can bring to the table as elders that we pass on to the younger generation.
I think I saw Quetzal's hands, but I also want to give Brett an opportunity to chime in here. And Quetzal, will come back to you and give Brett a chance here.
Thank you, Maribel. We started off at the beginning of the sheltering in place and things like that, of course, bummed about what was happening, and that we, just didn't know what was to come at the time, and scared and all of that. We quickly started canceling things. As a performer, gigs started being canceled. And so, I did one of the live stream concerts. It was not very satisfying to me. We tried a few Zoom jam sessions, community jam sessions. It was difficult. I mean, I can speak for the network of traditional musicians and community organizers that I am in touch with, and there are some who are able to pull off a community scene over the Zoom sessions, and so they're doing that. That was leading up to the summer and everything being canceled, we lost one camp that I'm artistic director of, the Cowan Creek Mountain Music Camp, and I lost another camp that was going to teach at. Typically, we have many occasions throughout the summer months that we gather at festivals, that camp out at workshops, and teach and play. And so we've not been able to do any of that. As an alternative, we've tried to come up with some projects that would benefit the community, teaching, making instructional videos with some of our traditional musicians and posting them for folks. That was kind of an alternative to meeting in person and having an in-person music school. So that's how COVID-19 kind of shut us down from being able to practice. But so as an organization, as Apple Shop, and I should say that I am also president of an organization, a nonprofit that I started called Kentucky Old Time Music Incorporated, where we organize a lot of these festivals and workshops and things through, and support others that happen throughout the state. So in our work at Apple Shop, at the beginning of the spring, we're writing program plans and we're planning things out for the year without really knowing exactly how everything's going to play out, and quickly had to scrap a lot of those proposals and planned work. Which was unfortunate. So, and then the struggle that Caroline was talking about came to the forefront with the killing of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and so many others, too many others. And so then it became about, okay, what are we doing? What can we be doing? And we started some internal committees within the Apple Shop to start talking about this issue. It's like take a self-inventory about where we're at with our work, what we're doing, and what this moment is affording us to do. And turning internally first to have this conversation and figure out how we can help fight the injustices, help support protesters. There was a small protest in a Black Lives Matter protest in Whitesburg, for instance, that officially we could not participate in, but of course members of the community all showed up and came out, and it was a good moment. For us, how do we become allies in the struggle, in the fight, and contribute And that takes a lot of self, evaluation, a lot of critiquing, and a lot of being in uncomfortable conversations and in uncomfortable spaces. And, ultimately, though, deciding that you're going to focus your energy towards a thing. And so that's kind of what we're in the middle of. So I would say that we're in very much a transitional space in many levels. And I think that this moment is changing how we will be approaching our work for the foreseeable future.
Definitely.
And I'm not sure exactly how, but it's definitely changing.
Considering, thank you so much for that. Considering what you know, all of you, or whoever wants to jump in, considering what you know about the strength of your community and the art that you wield, what are you most hopeful for at this time? And at the same time, in the same spectrum, what gives you pause? What concerns you? As you see the people that you know and the art forms that you know, what gives you hope and what gives you pause?
So, Carolyn, go ahead. Sorry.
What gives me hope is the fact that we're teaching younger people. As I said earlier, the average age of quilter in our group is 74 to 102. So anytime we get to teach younger people this craft, it's a glorious thing. People think that there are lots of quilters here in the United States, and there are, but we're just like a fraction of 1% of the nation's quilters. We're not that many people. So that's my hope, that we encourage new people to learn our craft. And also, I'm pleased and happy at the work that we're making now, which is the work that we leave for the next generation, because quilts are like cultural documents. They're no different from books. They're just visual. People hundreds of years from now will look at the work that we made and get a glimpse of what was going on at the moment we made the quilt in our nation's history, or in our families, in our communities. So that makes me happy. But what gives me pause is our aging community, and trying to get everything done before we leave here. So that's cause for concern, especially during this pandemic. It's really been brought home. Now we realize we're old. So, and it makes more critical our work.
So, thank you, Carolyn. That was beautiful. Hope. So, I'd like to talk about my son really quick, because he gives me lots of hope. He's 15 years old. His name is Sandino. And he was fortunate enough to grow up in the fandango tradition, as we were building relationships with a community, an Afro-Mexican community in Veracruz, Mexico. And this is a participatory music and dance practice, ritual, ceremony, etc., that is hundreds of years old. And because he's grown up in this tradition, and because he's grown up with Chicano music, he understands the connections between the Black and Brown community, and the moments of confluence throughout history, and the importance of this connection. And that without Black people, without Black music, Chicano music does not exist, right? And this is important for us. And so when the whole thing came down with George Floyd, he wrote this song that was based on the Drinking Gourd song. Now, for those of you who know the Drinking Gourd song was a song that was during the time of slavery. Enslaved Africans taught these songs to their children and to other people as a way to remind them what the path was to freedom. And so seeing George Floyd get murdered, seeing children in cages, seeing all these horrific things in this moment, that give us pause. He responded to it by composing a song that was so beautiful, and it was in Spanish, but the melody is based on the Drinking Gourd song. And so he's able to really articulate these feelings and lived reality, and this intersection and this interconnectedness of our communities and our lived realities as human beings who are experiencing oppression and violence, state violence, and as Karen mentioned, these horrible things that have been committed against our communities throughout history, and the feelings that we carry that are generational, and so this gives me a lot of hope, and being able to work in communities with traditional artists who maybe haven't really been, like a street vendor, for example, who hasn't really experienced being considered a traditional artist in this way, or an essential person, an essential piece, a cultural sort of cornerstone to a community. And when they do see themselves as that, when they look in the mirror and see how beautiful and powerful they are, how that generates a critical connection between us. And so these are the things that I'm holding on to in this moment.
It occurred to me as I asked the question, it dawned on me that I was setting up a binary between hope and fear or concern, when in a lot of ways, that's where the art brings out the power from the most difficult circumstances and then transforms it. And that's a different non-linear way of thinking about creativity that all of you bring to your work. And at the same time, I'm thinking we don't want to be the experts in pain all the time. We don't want to have the PhD in suffering as the badge of honors that we carry. And yet we know that pain in our communities is a source that generates new things. So wondering if we can, maybe sort of also talk about that continuum where we are involved in that sense of preserving and creating, and at the same time we're holding on the losses and keeping the ledgers. So I'll give a chance to Brett or Terrell or anyone who wants to sort of riff off that thought that just came to me as I was listening to you.
Well, from my can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I got to remember to put it on audio. For myself, using that pain, again, like you said, really helps me create, because you want to sort of, well, for myself, when I'm creating, using pain as inspiration, I'm documenting that time, and putting it in my piece to tell a story for the next generation. During this time, this epidemic, we lost several traditional basket weavers, and for myself, some of them were my dear friends, and they took with them specific knowledge of what made them so unique and what made them known for that technique of weaving. And we may never see that happen again. And for myself as an artist, I don't want to forget them, and I don't want other people to forget about them. So I'm working on pieces that will hopefully um, keep their keep their essence alive in weaving and their techniques. And you know, for myself, it's been very painful, but I've always used that as a lesson or as inspiration to create. And I always pass it on to my students that, you know, use everything that surrounds you, that you're feeling, to create your work, because it's, again, really important. And in a way, we're sort of documenting that point in history in our work, especially in my work.
Yeah, the example that I have, Maribel, is to me is through the musical traditions here in the coal fields, is that suffering and pain and sense of injustice, of course, leads to action, leads to there being a song that is the call for all of the people to stand up and take action. You know, the Harlan County wars, the fight to unionize, all of these movements in the coal fields toward labor rights and just living with decency, and have all used song as a rallying cry. And a lot of times it's traditional song, and they're updated. One of the first notions that came to me was to create, to express myself through a song that came to mind. So I was sitting not too long ago and thinking about the song Outshine the Sun, which is a hymn. And the words started changing in my head to like, when all people get to vote, we will outshine the sun. We will outshine the sun. We will outshine the sun. When all people get to vote, we will outshine the sun and march to freedom side by side. You know, taking an old hymn, creating an updated message. That was one of my instincts in recent months. It's such a part of the story that I know. It's such a, I mean, the people that I really look up to are, in my practice, are Sarah Ogan Gunning, and just so many others. And my mentors include many of the people at Apple Shop, whom I've been around for most of my adult life now, who were in the 70s, you know, fighting the broad form deed to try to get people access to their land back. And you know, we're in an extractive region where the value of our people and our land is our resources, and our culture is not valued. We've got a culture of out-migration. We're experiencing that again now. The population is dwindling. The economy is bust. There's no real economy to speak of left, and so there are fewer and fewer of us trying to hold on to these stories. The beautiful thing is, you know, like the stories that came to the mountain, they leave the mountain, go out and make new experiences and come back, and all of these things. And so the you know, that's a source of hope.
To respond to your question about hope and fear. For me, fear translates into motivation. I use that as motivation. I don't have fear, but I do have hope in the next generation. I've been teaching for over 40 years now, My students that just started with me at 3 years old just graduated from college, which is statistically in the Native Hawaiian community, only 14% will go on to higher education. And yet, I would swear 90% of my students have gotten graduated with higher education and have gone on to serve a community. So I have students that are now urban planners, that are in the governor's cabinet, that are at FAA, that are in the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, that are at positions of decision making. So that's what I see the benefit of our collective classes in Halal Hula. We're the largest arts organization in the state of Hawaii, but the least funded. And we do it in spite of funding. We do it without funding. We do it because we know that we have to do these things. We have to pass on these stories, these chants, these dances to the next generation, to remind them that we are the ancestor, we are the indigenous people of our land. And everybody that comes here to educate the visitors that come here, businesses that move here to start up businesses, to make decisions on development on our lands, that we are these indigenous people and we have a say, to motivate our people to get out to vote. As people of color, we can make decisions and we can make policy, but we have to give them the tools to be able to do that. That's why I see hula as a grounding them into the sacred sites and the importance of our land and land development. Why so many of my students have gone into urban planning to see the struggles that we had in the 90s to protect our land. They've all gone. Now they're in decision-making positions in state, private sector, and are making a difference. So that's where I think we as Native and people of color have to instill in the next generation. So I really see this as being motivating for me to get that next generation. And, you know, we made a difference in our mayoral election. Get all the Hawaiians to vote one way. Get all the people of color to vote one way. Regardless of, let's look at what the major issues. We just did in my halal, sat down around the table, talked about who's running for office, and had a really great discussion on who we thought the best candidates were for, and are advocating for that. That comes out of us as a cultural practice, strategically too. And I think that, you know, on the one side of my family, because I descend from Hawaiian royalty, from people that were decision makers, my grandfather was in the state house, my brother was in the state senate, my nephew is currently in the state house, my father was, but on my mother's side, we were all dancers. I chose my mom's side. Not wanting to run for office, but I want to make some changes in that house. And so motivating our students, their parents, their families to get involved in the political process, I think is important. And if we can take that and translate that to the vote, then we can make a difference.
One of the things I love about working in the traditional arts fields with folks like you is that we always tweak the definitions that most people have about professions. So you're not a politician, but you are very attuned to dynamics of power. You're not a doctor, a medical doctor, but you're a healer, and all of these ways in which we all are embodying practices that are common sense. One of the questions that came from the audience listening today has to do with the emphasis in education towards the science, engineering, math, and in what ways in educational context the traditional arts can play a role, not just for the greater humanity that the arts brings to people, but actually the science knowledge that is embedded in traditional knowledge, whether it's making a quilt or whether it's movement, body movement, or certainly music, in basket. So So that's a question from the audience. If you could just talk about that. Also, another binary that is troubling.
I'll just go, I replied to him privately that, you know, we can translate that. When we make our natural dyes for our costumes and our things, I can talk to you about the chemical reaction that happens when you take that plant material, what happens when you grate it and heat it up. There's a chemical reaction. So that can be scientific, that can be used in science. What's the square footage yield for the amount of taro for this square, for this plot here? How much yield can we get to feed, how many families can we feed? All those are math. What is, you know, that, so, and then what happens to the water from its point source when you divert it to your taro plant patch and bring it back and then take it down to the ocean so that the life forces in the ocean are nurtured by that. But what happens when you don't do that? When scientists or other developers take that point source away, what happens and dries up the land? Then you can't feed the family, then you can't, and the resources, and so the fish in the ocean, you deplete the resources in the ocean. So those are all the kinds of things that I did in privately with whoever asked that question. But yeah, we do that. I mean, that's the science in the STEAM. They forget that the arts are critical to all of this and can be playing music. There's a tempo there. You know,
I saw Quetzal and Carolyn. I saw them both eager to talk about this.
Carolyn, you go first.
In my first life, I was an aerospace engineer, and and I can tell you, we do use math in quilt making, and there are many math teachers that are using quilt making to teach math. So there is an overlap. There is definitely an overlap. So for those people interested how these come together in quilt making, you just have to look at a patchwork quilt and think about the math that it takes to put these little quilt pieces together. Anyway, but that's my little spiel on that.
So I'm going to tell you what I think about. So people often say, how can we use traditional arts for this? Or how can we use traditional arts for that, right? And what I think is, how can we use traditional arts to dismantle white supremacist capitalist patriarchy? You know, it's not about traditional arts in service of science and math. It's about deconstructing this racist fucking system, including the school system, and utilizing the traditional arts as systems from which shit was stolen anyway. Our government was stolen. The idea of the government was stolen from Native people, but they didn't know how to implement it right because their shit was all messed up, right? And so, how do we use traditional arts as systems, as inherently holding these embedded systems, and how do we use that to heal and move forward in healthy ways? And so that's what I think about.
Well, why don't you tell us what you really think? Another question that anyone can jump in here. Don't, Carolyn, did you want to speak again?
I just want to say, as an artist and an arts organizer, I firmly believe that art can make a difference just by a visitor going to a museum and seeing what we have created in answer to racism or some social and political issues. I've been doing this for 40 years, and I get letters all the time from viewers that have gone to our exhibitions, and they've come away with different thoughts and some change in their heart. So it may be a small matter, just one person at a time, but still that art has the capacity to inflict a change in someone's heart. I've seen it. I've seen it. And I get letters all the time about this. So it does make a difference. And it's one of the things that helps propel me to keep making art, as well as the quilt makers. We need that feedback from the audience, knowing that we're there making a change, and it's possible. It happens.
I have a question here for Terrell, and it's a really interesting question about, have you noticed that it probably applies to all of you, but it's been directed to Terrell here in the chat. Have you noticed that you can trace periods of sociocultural distress through the kind of baskets that women and people make or didn't make, or the lack of, can the social cultural distress appear in the record of the art that is created? Unmute. Unmute.
Oh, there you go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, we're sort of, with the work that we're doing, especially if we want to make a statement, we're documenting that period of time in our work. So over the years of me studying, going to archives, seeing the different timelines that weavers would stitch in their work to tell a story. One particular piece that I remember, I was curating a show and I saw this amazing, beautiful piece, and it was depicting a weaver sitting at a train station and watching tourists come by, and kids riding their bikes along the street there, and it was her looking at her environment and looking at the time when trains were coming in and out of Tucson, and it was her seeing tourists coming into the area, and over the years seeing different types of documentation in these baskets telling stories, because we're not only as a basket weaver but as an artist, we're telling stories, we're documenting those times, either that affect me personally or that affect my community. And so those and I love those types of work that come out. And I always tell my students, use your environment, use your emotions, use those things to inspire you to create these pieces, or to tell a story, or to make a statement. I think you have a picture of one of my pieces, the creosote piece there, and I made that piece to bring awareness to the environment. The creosote piece there is made primarily of creosote, and it's a multi medicinal medicine for us, for the Othan people. And I used that in the piece because when it dries, it gets very brittle and the leaves fall off. And I was using that as a statement to be aware of our environment, because right now where I'm at, there's a lot of development happening, and we're losing that medicine, we're losing that land. And if we don't pay attention to what we're doing, we're going to lose it. So with this particular piece, I intentionally put that I use that material so that it could break apart and fall apart.
I was thinking, Brett, about how the same record of experience happens in songs, coal mining was in the first song that we played, that one of your original compositions. And yet there is a tendency in our field, or when people think about folk and traditional music, to think about the celebration of a tradition. So the celebration of the coal miner as a profession, as a source of family pride and heritage. And yet in the songs, you were bringing critique of the industry, and you told us your own story. So this distress that appears in the art form, in the case of the region where you work at, how does that play? How do you celebrate an identity on the one hand and critique it and dismantle it on the other hand?
Celebrate it. I mean, celebrate is maybe not the right word. Exercise it. Exercise it so that we continue to use that as a voice for the voiceless. For it's my friend. I'm quoting Rich Kirby, quoting Tommy Bledsoe by saying about our region is it's a morbid culture, but we love it. Mm-hmm. And certainly a lot of the subject matters for the traditional repertoire are that of struggle, of pain, and we still, you know, it's kind of been that way for as long as the industry has occupied it. So, you know, the poverty that exists there is has existed there at a level to gain national attention, certainly through the war on poverty. And Apple Shop is a project that was established in 1969 with War on Poverty funds. This is poverty that is created by the system that is in place. And it's, you know, a lot of those who depend on this system are impoverished, but are not getting what they need because of exploitation, because the exploitation of land and labor in the Appalachian coal fields. I'll go. So I celebrate the culture and its many facets. There are not a lot of happy coal mining songs. You know, some about people who loved the work, but I don't know that anybody ever felt a sense of justice as a laborer in these situations, in these conditions. And the conditions continue, the conditions of very poor drinking water, the conditions of very poor public health access, the conditions of very of limited access to healthy foods, you know, these are still all very, very much challenges that we face and have for 120 years now. Mm-hmm. And you know, we as a people certainly could become discouraged, distressed, and we do. It's a very depressed region and very unhealthy region and very poor region. And our culture over the years, in order for what has happened to take place, has been minimized and you know, tried to abolished largely. And I think that goes for many cultures across colonized areas. So all of these are struggles that have been with our people in the mountains all along, and is part of the reason why the area in where I'm at in Central Appalachia has a very rich cultural tradition of song, of tunes, of adapting. We've had to.
Brett, I realized that I threw a real fastball there at you with that question, and I really appreciate you, the way that you answer it. I want to tell you, be the bearer of bad news and say that we've pretty much run out of time for our program today. I know that a lot of folklorists will be thinking and staying up tonight thinking about how do we exercise our traditional repertoire. You've given us, all of you gave us language to think about. And time has come to come to an end here. Our hearts are full. Our minds have much to digest as well. Our spirits have been lifted with your words, with this powerful conversation. And boy, do we ever need that. We need uplifting and affirmation of all that is good and worth fighting for. So thank you to each one of you. Thank you to the 250 plus people who joined us today. I want to give a big outstanding ovation for our Spanish and ASL interpreters. Thank you. As we leave the forum, you may linger a little bit to hear another tune by Ratliff. This one is going to be called 9 Miles Out of Louisville. And it's a classic example of Kentucky fiddle, most likely a tune that can be attributed to the Lewis County famed fiddler Buddy Thomas. And I want to thank all of you from the bottom of my heart, our artists who gave us this gift of conversation and obviously left us hungry for more. And to all of you who joined us today, thank you. Come on now, you know what to do. Thank you, friends.